Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Today, we have a special guest on the show. We're joined by Michael Bungay Stanier, who's a top-rated thought leader and a keynote speaker on leadership and coaching. He's also the author of the best-selling books, The Coaching Habit and The Advice Trap. Welcome to the show, Michael. How are you?
I'm great, Chris. How you doing?
Not too bad. So thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, look, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Before we jump in, first and foremost, how are you?
I'm actually pretty good. My company Box Your Crayons is out there in the world trying to train people to be more coach-like and working in organizations. But, they've cunningly and sensibly put me in a corner and go, Michael, you're best writing books and showing up on podcasts occasionally. So actually, it's not such a big deal. And, next week I celebrate my 25th wedding anniversary with my wife, and we still like each other. So actually hanging out together is actually a pretty good thing. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Love it. I thought I was doing well with, 15 years now with my...
You are doing well. Honestly, yeah. I was writing about this for my newsletter. I'm like, to get to 15 years or 25 years, you got to have good timing. You got to have the right balance of kind of tolerance and intolerance, know when to look away and know when not to look away. And then you got to have the gods on your side. You got to have the gods throwing good dice for you because, I think everybody knows people who've got divorced through just because time and you grow apart or you just become different people to kind of actually be able to hang out with somebody for this long and go, hey, somehow we've continued to emerge into this world at roughly the same pace, walking roughly the same path is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because my wife and I, we've been together since we were 17, and we are completely different people to who we were then. But we grew together and we kind of gone through different stages, and I think it actually made our relationship stronger along the way. So my wife was there when I didn't have a job and she had to, loan me some money to go to an interview. She saw that version of Chris, the version very lowest. And then vice versa on her side as well, right? So we've it's been an evolution, and it's been good times, it's been bad times. But I think especially right now as well, I think, let's not make it a relationship podcast, but I think relationships are being tested more so now than ever with people stuck at home with their partners all day, every day.
I know. I mean, I look at some of the people I know and I'm like, I'm happily child-free. I know you got kids, but I'm like, never had kids and delighted by that choice for myself. And I just think of people who are trying to hold down jobs, show up, hold down relationships, and also parent and also school their kids at the moment. It's nuts. I don't know how anybody's doing that. Yeah. The only advice I've got for people is just lower your standards. Whatever your standards are, notch them down another 3 notches because you're just trying to get through this.
I was saying that to a few of my friends. One of my friends said recently, I was really upset because my daughter was trying to show me a project at school that she did throughout the day, but I was there trying to finish a piece of work and only realized after that she'd just been ignoring. And I was like, don't be so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
Like, right now we can't. We're juggling a million different things, so
it's like feel the feelings and then go. You know what? I'll just forgive myself on this and do the best I can in the next moment.
Yeah. Well, before we go any further, tell everyone a bit more about yourself. You've had a very interesting journey to where we are today. I'd love you to share a bit more with everyone about how you got to where we are now and the work you do.
It's always that I don't know if you've ever heard the quote, inspiration is when your past suddenly makes sense. When you look back and you're like, oh,
I love that quote.
It's good, isn't it? Because when you're in the middle of the journey, you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing, really. I'm just lurching from opportunity to opportunity. But to the snappy tale of how I got to be here in Toronto and a best-selling author and all that good stuff. Grew up in Australia, happy family. Went to university in my hometown, Canberra, did what's known as an arts law degree, so partly studying literature and also doing a law degree at the same time. In literature, I loved and I was good at it. Law, pretty bad at it, quite frankly. And in fact, finished my law school being sued by one of my law school lecturers for defamation. So I knew that wasn't going that well, and but was saved from becoming a mostly incompetent and largely unhappy lawyer by winning a Rhodes Scholarship, which took me to England to study. I met my wife at Oxford 25 years ago, or 27 years ago now, because we hung out for a bit before we got married. Staggered out of university and education, worked in the world of innovation and creativity. So I played a minor role in helping to invent stuffed crust pizza, which exactly
claim to fame right there.
Well, see, that was my deep fear, Chris. I'm like, if that is my claim to fame, if that is the high point of my career, it's actually a terrible career, because I don't want to die going, he made some small contribution to global obesity. That's not the pitch I'm after. So that took me into the world of actual organizational development and change, because I was really curious that it was so difficult to take our good ideas that we had for products and services and actually have them survive the process of going into the organization and getting launched. They kept failing. And I'm like, why is that? And really, I was like, I need to understand how change management works. So I became a change management consultant and worked in England for a while, then moved to the States in Boston and lived in Boston there. And that really got me interested in what I think are the two kind of the interesting pulsing hearts of HR and change, which is how do you build organizations to be people positive, so centered around that, and also complexity conscious that our organizations aren't machines. You can't just pull a lever and hope that something good pops out the other side. They're complex systems. And if you're an HR leader or an OD leader or an L&D leader, you have to manage to that. I get those two terms, by the way, from a wonderful book by a guy called Aaron Dignan called Brave New Work, which is fantastic.
Oh, I've not read that one. That's
I put it on the list because it's one of the best books I've read in a long time. 20 years ago, I started Box of Crayons, and over time, it found its focus. And the way we talk about it now is we help organizations shift from advice-driven to curiosity-led. And behind a lot of that are the success of the books that I've written. So The Coaching Habit came out about 4 years ago, sold 800,000 copies. So it's like the #1 coaching book of the century. And I got named #1 thought leader in coaching and other sort of bits and pieces like that. And then a new book called The Advice Trap, which came out a couple of months ago, which is all about how do you change your behavior to stay curious? Because everybody gets it intellectually, but in practice, we have this internal advice monster that keeps making us want to tell people what to do. And so how do you tame your advice monster?
Well, let's jump into that for a second, because we are going to talk about the coaching habit and the new book as well. Sure. But let's jump into that question for a second, that topic you just said. How do we remain curious?
So, because there's a ton of great research that says, look, curiosity is a bit of a superpower. If you're a leader, it's not only makes your own life better, helps you drive resilience, helps you get better outcomes. It not only makes your teams better so that they're more focused on the work that matters, so that they're more agile, but it helps your organization be more innovative, more curious. One of our key clients is Microsoft, and Satya Nadella is doing such a brilliant job at a culture shift at Microsoft. And he's like, we need to shift from a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture. And let's face it, Microsoft have been, if we're talking about Microsoft 7 years ago, we'd be like, yeah, Microsoft, how the mighty have fallen. Now we look at Microsoft and go, wow, you are actually an aspirational organization. It's pretty cool to work with them around that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Chris, we get it in theory. In practice, we've spent our lifetime being rewarded for having the answer. School, high school, university, our early career. It's like, do you know your stuff? Can you pass the test? Can you add value by telling other people stuff? And at a certain point, you realize that there are 3 reasons why your advice doesn't work. First of all, you're trying to solve the wrong problem, because the first challenge that shows up is almost never the real challenge. It's certainly not the only challenge. And actually, if you dive in to try and fix the first problem, you're wasting everybody's time. But even if you've got the right problem, the second reason advice doesn't work is actually your advice just isn't as good as you think it is. And for all those people who are listening to us going, Michael, you've never met me and you don't understand. My advice is fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm extraordinary in my advice giving. What I'd encourage you to do is go read up on cognitive biases, because our brains are wired to convince us that our advice is much better than it actually is. And quite frankly, your advice isn't nearly as good as you think it is, particularly that advice you start delivering in an automatic response. As soon as somebody starts talking, you want to tell them stuff. That's not good advice. But the third reason why advice doesn't work is the more profound one, which is actually it's not the appropriate leadership act. And, so much of what HR is about what does great leadership mean in our organizations. And even if you have the right problem, like you've figured out what the real challenge is that needs to be sorted out, and even if you have a brilliant idea, it's gold dust, it's pearls of wisdom, you have this moment, Chris, where you're like, is the best thing for me to do to tell them something, tell them what to do? Or is it to pause a moment and let them figure this out for themselves? One is a little faster and also breeds reliance on you, helps you become a bottleneck, helps disempower them, helps build a pattern of behavior, which is like the way I get things done is I go and just ask Chris for his idea. The other one is what builds people who are more competent and more confident and more self-sufficient and more autonomous. And that is often the powerful choice. It's not the only choice. I mean, there's absolutely times where giving advice is the right thing to do. But for me and for the work at Box of Crayons, what we're all about is, can we slow down the rush to action and advice giving? And can we stay curious a little bit longer?
Yeah, I love that, by the way, because it's so easy as a leader to do that, but you're taking away so much opportunity as well. And I would add to what you said, engaged. There's so much more engaged when they feel part of the process of discovery.
Let's face it, Chris, people do it for the best of intentions. I'm trying to help.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's not enough. And it's not a good enough reason to do it, because you're trying to help is actually not helpful for them, not helpful for you, not helpful for your organization either.
Mm-hmm. How do we, what are some practical steps or things that we can do then to make sure that's part of our leadership and our decision making?
There are two tracks people often tend to go. With the Coaching Habit book, part of the reasons it's been so successful is that it simplifies this whole idea of coaching. It makes it less weird, and it makes it feel accessible to everybody. You don't have to be a HR person. You don't have to be a people person. It's like, actually, in the book, it's like, look, 7 good questions carry you a long way down the path.
Can we go over that, by the way? I wrote that down, the questions. Can we go over those?
Oh, sure. We'll come back to that. Let me so for some people, quite a lot of people, there's like, once you learn the questions, that's often all you need. You're like, oh, that's what I was waiting for. I just needed somebody to tell me how to get going on this. I just needed the kickstart question so I could get into a conversation fast and with curiosity, well, whatever it might be. Other people are like, oh, you know what? You've got more work to do. Because even if I give you the 7 questions, it's not enough. You're like, yeah, I know the 7 questions. For some reason, I keep telling people what to do. I can't shift my behavior. It's not easy change. It's hard change. And for the starting point is you've got to start seeing clearly the prizes and punishments of your current behavior. What you get from it, which is often short-term wins, like, oh, I feel more in control. Oh, I feel like I'm the smartest person in the room. Oh, I feel like I'm saving everybody. Oh, I feel like I'm rescuing the world. Oh, I feel like I'm in control. Oh, I feel like I'm not out of control. You get all of that, but then you start weighing up that against the punishments, which is like, I'm exhausted. I'm a bottleneck. My advice isn't that great. I'm disempowering other people. I'm trying to save people who can't be saved. I'm trying to control what can't be controlled. I'm trying to have the answer to everything and every problem, which is impossible. And that's a deeper piece of work around figuring out what you need to say yes to so you can say no to your advice monster taking control.
I'm just reflecting on myself right now. I'm in that second category that you're talking about, and I'm sure I'm probably not alone.
and what doesn't work, Chris, is for people going, you know what, that podcast with Michael and Chris, genius. I mean, and to be fair, it is genius, but it's not enough to then go, look, genius, I'll just try and be more coach-like, which is the language I started using. I don't want you to be a coach. I want you to be you who is more coach-like. That's not enough. Because what happens is people try with good intentions, they fail, they give up, they're back to their old ways of working. What really helps once you start seeing the prizes and punishments is to make small deliberate steps, what BJ Fogg would call tiny habits. And so for you, Chris, I'd be like, don't try and be coach-like to you and your team and your family or whoever. pick a person. It might be Ivan, our producer. It might be your wife. It might be somebody else on the HR leaders team. And you might be thinking to yourself, right, that person there, I'd love to be curious with them a bit longer, lead in that way with that person. And in particular with that person, let's say it's Ivan, who's working behind the scenes here to make us both look good. You're like, you know what? Every time we do a debrief after a podcast, I just launch into telling him stuff. And you know what? I'm trying to shift that. So I'm going to build a new habit. And, in the coaching habit, the first chapter is all about the habit formula. When this happens, instead of I will. So when this happens, I do my post-show debrief with Ivan. Instead of launching into my opinion about what he should do differently next time, I will ask the question, so Ivan, what's the real challenge here for you in getting this podcast to the next level? Or Ivan, what's on your mind? When you think about that podcast with Michael, what's on your mind? And now you're building this deliberate, different habit that will allow you to start shifting your behavior.
Absolutely love it. Yeah. Sorry, Ivan, I don't do that. I normally it's after the show. Ivan, why don't you do this?
Exactly. Look, before you came on, Chris, Ivan just was telling me about it. Honestly, you're a nightmare, mate. I'm surprised he's still here. And in fact, he's doing such a good job producing it. I'm like, I'm going to make him an offer after we're done here.
Man, Ivan, we don't do that to me.
Come work with me, mate. I'm a much nicer guy, better looking, better background. This guy's got a grand piano in your background. Who wants to work with somebody with a grand piano?
By the way, Agnes on LinkedIn, thank you for your comment. Agnes said, absolutely love your way of thinking about advice.
Thanks, Agnes.
And she 100% agrees with you. You need to give people space, space for people to grow and develop themselves. So
yeah, but here's the thing I want to build on what Agnes is saying, and this is important for people to hear. This isn't a rant against advice, because advice is a critical part of how we lead and how we communicate and how we teach and parent, all of that. What this is a rant against is your default response being advice. We're trying to break that default leaping in as soon as somebody starts. Your advice monster. Somebody starts talking, and even though you don't know that person particularly well, and you don't know really what they're talking about, and you don't know the other people involved, and you don't know the context or the text specifications, after about 10 seconds, your advice monster is going, I'm going to add some value to this conversation. I'm now waiting for you to shut up so I can tell you stuff.
We all know that feeling, yeah.
That's the advice monster, and that's what we're looking to tame here. That's what we're looking to change the way that we work.
Ivan, we need to make a clip from this with a monster that we're going to build.
Right. An advice monster coming up out of the dark going, here I am. I'm adding value. I've got something to say.
With like a picture inside someone's brain, Ivan, with a little monster in there trying to get out. So,
exactly.
Well, this gives the people some practical examples of some of the questions that they can be asking, because I love that part of the book, and is one of the things that I've already written down myself personally as things that to use in my daily conversations and meetings with the team.
Well, let me ask you this, Chris. Was there a question of the 7 that particularly grabbed you, one that you're like, I really like this one, I think this could be helpful?
To be honest, I think there's so many. Say about time yourself. Let's start with a kickstart question.
Yeah, sure. So I need to take 2 steps back before I can take 1 step forward. So the 2 steps back is the principles by which I think coaching requires to flourish in organizations. And there are 3. And the 3 principles that we say to people are like, you need to be lazy, you need to be curious, you need to be often. So being curious, we've kind of talked about. Tame your advice monster. Stay curious a little bit longer. Being often, let's go be lazy, which is, it sounds like the most provocative of the 3. It is. It's like, stop trying to save everybody. Stop trying to solve other people's problems for them. Your job isn't to solve their problem. Your job is often to help them figure out what the real challenge is. But then there's be often. And be often is to say, look, every interaction can be more coach-like, because that means just staying curious a little bit longer. But those 3 principles only work if coaching is a succinct, short, everyday way of working and interacting with people. And in fact, kind of the stand we take is, if you can't coach in 10 minutes or less, you don't have time to coach. Now, Lots of people are like, that sounds good. I like it.
Yeah.
but then you're like, but that means we've got to get into the real conversation fast. We don't have time to kind of have one of those long, rambly conversations where if you're on the one side of it, you're like, I don't know where this conversation is going. I don't know what it's about. And we're already 25 minutes into it. This is like my life that I'm not going to ever get back again. I've got podcasts to listen to, and I'm listening to this person instead. What's going on here? So the kickstart question, I think, is a really powerful way to kind of accelerate your way into what the real challenge is fast. And the kickstart question is simply, what's on your mind? What's on your mind? Because the power of that, Chris, is it is an open question. It doesn't set the agenda. It doesn't dictate the terms. It doesn't point the direction. But it does say, I don't want to talk about everything or anything or about trivia. I want to hear what you're worried about, or what you're excited about, or what you're overwhelmed about, or what's consuming you, or what we just need to figure out fast now. Tell me what's on your mind. And what you find by opening that up is you just go to a more interesting place fast. And you're like, all right, we're already here. Wow, that normally takes me 20 minutes to get to this point. I just asked what's on your mind, and we're already there. And I'll give you a really practical place to start using that right away. For everybody here who has one-to-ones with the people that they manage and lead, and they think to themselves, don't tell anybody else, but I hate my one-to-ones. They're boring. They come in and they're like, they tell me what they've been doing for the last week. And honestly, I'm kind of interested, kind of not that interested. They're not that interested either. They're just doing this for hygiene purposes, just to prove that they're, still employable. And you go through this ritual of checking in with each other, and it's like, it takes time. It seems to diminish rather than enliven. And you're like, how do I make my one-to-ones better? And one key way of doing it is to say, hey, Chris, I know you're doing a ton of stuff. I want to be as helpful as I can in the half an hour we've got. Tell me what's on your mind. And boom, we're into something juicy and interesting. Now, obviously, the first time you do that, they're going to freak out because they're like, what the hell happened here?
Yeah,
I thought we were doing a ritualized dance of tedium, but apparently not. We're apparently into a real conversation. So you might want to give them a warning that you're going to do this. You're like, hey, Chris, heads up, our one-to-ones tomorrow. I'm changing the rules. And this is what I'll tell you exactly what I'm going to ask you, because I want this to be useful for you. What's on your mind? That's going to be my first question. So come ready to talk about the thing that's on your mind so we can really squeeze value out of that 30 minutes together.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Do you find that it becomes, as you do that again over and over again, that it becomes easier and quicker the more you do it, the more repetitions?
Yeah. And it becomes easier for both parties. Yes. Because, one of the things I try and persuade people not to do is to be tricky around the coaching, because they're like, oh, I'm doing this coaching thing now, or I won't tell anybody. I'll just try and manipulate them into kind of this new way of leading. I'm like, why bother? It's exhausting. Like, you want them on your side. You're not trying to manipulate them. You're trying to engage them in an adult to adult relationship. So in the best possible way, what happens is the other person, the person that you're leading and managing and coaching, actually starts understanding the process and starts being more independent. I mean, I'll give you a story. I was working with a friend of mine, a guy also called Michael, and I trained him in these 7 questions. And in fact, he facilitated courses with me before he went back to being a CHRO. And he called me up one day. He goes, Michael, I've got this thing that's going on at the company I'm working at. And then he said, but you know what, you always ask me the same damn question. You go, so what's the real challenge here for you? And okay, so the real challenge for me is blah, blah, blah. And he goes, and then you'd probably just go, and what else? So actually, well, what else is this, blah, blah, blah. And then you'd go, well, what's the real challenge? And he said, well, actually, now you mention it, the real challenge is this. And then, of course, Michael, you just asked me, well, what do you want? And I'm like, well, what I want is this. And literally, it was like a 12-minute monologue. I didn't say anything for the 12 minutes. At the end of it, he's like, genius. That was the best coaching conversation I've ever had. You're a legend. And I'm like, you know what? I am a legend because
you coach yourself for it.
So one of the things that I've come to realize around coaching is often the most powerful thing you're doing is you're holding the space for people to do a little bit of thinking. because we're so busy in our organizational lives. We've all got too many emails, we've all got too many tasks and KPIs and OKRs and whatever else, that we're all about I'm just doing a whole lot, and maybe I get a little bit of thinking in, maybe I don't. But if you're trying to be more coach-like, what you're often doing is just creating a little bit of space to say, let's tackle what's difficult right now and see what we can figure out. And it doesn't take much time. It doesn't take much space. It takes discipline, though, to actually say, I've stayed focused on the stuff that matters.
Yeah, it's tough to do that.
It is,
especially right now.
And it's also practice, because what you realize is the reason. Well, actually, it comes down to one of the coaching questions. The strategic question is, if you're going to say yes to this, what must you say no to? Mm-hmm. And actually, part of, in any call to be more mindful about how you act, is a decision to stop doing something. So if you want to be more coach-like, what will you stop? What will you say no to? And part of it is to be run by your to-do list and by your email, your inbox.
Yeah. What was the inspiration behind the new book then? So you had the success of the coaching habit,
Yeah. So part of it,
everyone definitely go grab a copy of that. There's obviously, we're not going to go through every single question, otherwise we'll have a 3-hour show.
Exactly.
What was the inspiration behind the new book?
The inspiration was, when I said you got two choices, the people who just get the 7 questions and run with it, and other people who go, it's a little harder for me to shift my behavior. So I wrote the new book, The Advice Trap, for people like that, who went, you gotta help me break an old, deep habit of leaping in and giving advice. So in The Advice Trap, that's where we get into the advice monster. There's actually 3 different advice monsters. There's tell it, save it, and control it. And in fact, if you go to theadvicetrap.com, there's a little questionnaire you can take to figure out which of those 3 advice monsters is most real for you. Is it tell it, is it save it, or is it control it? With some kind of tactics and stuff you get in the report. And I was like, I'm really trying to tackle a kind of deeper level of behavior change, because I strongly believe that our lives get better when more of us are curious, at an individual level, at a team level, at an organizational level. And I also just want to acknowledge that it's like easy in theory, hard in practice. So the new book is for anybody who goes, I'd love to be more curious. Damn it, I keep having my advice monster taking over and I'm running the show. I want to tame my advice monster.
How do you balance the two, though? Because I always describe myself and my business partner as those 2 ends of the spectrums, where I'm always the one who's curious, looking for new, what's new out there, innovate, and trying to constantly innovate and find new ways. But sometimes I have too much going on there, and I'm not executing on what we need to be doing in a business. There's this like fine balance between the two. All of my friends just say, stick to that one thing, Chris. You're always looking for I'm the curiosity part of my brain. I can't turn it off.
Yeah, no, I get that. I hear you. I suffer from SOS myself, shiny object syndrome. So, Daniel Goleman, who popularized the whole idea of emotional intelligence, in the year 2000 wrote an article for HBR called Leadership That Gets Results. And he said, look, actually, there are 6 different styles of leadership. The best leaders know how to use all 6 of those. And each style has its pros and its cons, its prizes and its punishments. He also found that typical average leaders were using 2, maybe 3 of those different styles. So the first thing to say, Chris, is actually, if you're going to be a really powerful leader, knowing how to use different leadership styles at different times is the thing to be doing. For most people, curiosity and a coach-like leadership style is their underutilized leadership style. It needs to be used more often. But then you get into the piece around the diversity of a team and the power of having different thinking styles and leadership styles and different skills on a team. And there's a ton of great research that says, founders of a company, it's great to have that kind of divergent skill. So there is somebody who is no, let's head for the hills, because there's a new thing that I'm seeing out there, and I can't be doing with all this day-to-day miscellaneous detail stuff.
That's me.
Then there's some person who's going, dude, I'm not asking you to cross all the I's and dot all the T's. I'm just asking you to do some of the minutiae that we need to deliver on an operational level.
That's Shane.
And so often, and so often there's that really healthy tension. What's required is an understanding of how to balance that tension. So you have a working process that maintains the relationship while allows the tension to playing out. And often that coach-like style can be the useful management process to balance your visionariness with their operationalness. Because you can have that tension. And if I come into the two of you, I go, so Chris, for you, what's the real challenge here for you? And then to your partner, so for you, what's the real challenge here for you? And Chris, and this is the foundation question, number 4 in the book. Chris, what do you want? I mean, what do you really want? And then to your partner, what do you want? What do you really want? And then I might take a question that's not in the book, but from Roger Martin's book, where he goes, if you got this and you got this, what needs to be true for both of those visions to be able to be enforced and acted upon? And now we're having a conversation that respects the different skills and the different tensions and the different pacing, but is still more coach-like because it's driving curiosity to a better outcome.
Yeah, love it. Well, we need to bring you in. We need to bring you in to ask the questions. But I think in the beginning we didn't really we kind of found our way to those roles, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And when we first set up the company, we were kind of both doing a bit of everything. We were trying to get the business off the ground, and then we slowly kind of morphed into those roles naturally. It wasn't even a discussion. We just realized Shane was better off being leveraged here. Chris is kind of looking at new ways we can innovate new products, content, etc. Similar to what you said about your own organization.
Yeah,
you're out doing the live streams, the podcasts, speaking. I'm like that within our business almost.
Exactly. I mean, I was a CEO at Box of Crayons for many years, and about a year ago stopped being that because honestly, the skill required to take the company from this level to the next level is a skill that I barely got, and I'm not that interested in actually trying to use. The thing for you and Shane, though, and this is just actually advice to anybody in a working relationship with anybody, is to step back occasionally and ask each other about how the relationship is going. Because here's the thing, when you're driven to achieve something, you're like, we're trying to grow the company, or we're trying to have an impact, or we're trying to be known, or we're trying to get sponsorship, or whatever it might be. It's so easy just to talk about the stuff that needs to be done. What's the plan and how are we going to implement the plan? To maintain resilience, you need to step back and go, hey, how's this way of working for you? What of all the things we're doing, what do you like? What do you celebrate about our working relationship? What are you doing? What am I doing? What are we doing? What's the stuff that's secretly driving you a bit nuts about this working relationship, about you, about me, about us? With Shannon, who's the CEO at Box of Crayons now, when we talk, one of the ways that we will often finish a conversation is what needs to be said that hasn't been said. And it's a question that opens up permission to talk about the stuff that's a bit messy, that's a bit broken, that's a bit unsatisfactory. And it doesn't have to be badly broken or really annoying or really ugly. It's just like, I'm feeling the irritation. Let's see if we can talk about it now to keep this relationship clean and resilient and crisp and powerful.
Oh, I love that one. That's a really good one. Yeah. Amazing. So when you're working with these organizations and speaking, what are the main things that you're requested? Because obviously you speak on a number of different topics and coach on a number of different areas. What's the number one sort of challenge people are coming to you with saying, Michael, please help us?
Yeah. Honestly, I most commonly am speaking in big organizations. So like, with Microsoft, for instance, the training that we're doing there is touching tens of thousands of their employees to help shift the culture, just as Satya has asked us to do. And, the last thing I did for them, I was at one of their big conferences, and actually it was wonderful because I through virtual training and other trainings, been teaching them some of these coaching skills. And I came on stage, like 4,000 people, and I actually coached a couple of their senior leaders in front of their peers. So these are people who are really senior. Wow. They're in the leadership team. They report to Satya Nadella, the CEO. and actually coaching them in front of their organization, right? Thousands of people in their organization. And part of the power of that is a statement of intent by these very courageous leaders to say, I'm willing to be vulnerable. I'm willing to put myself on the spotlight. It's a statement of intent around their commitment to being more coach-like, and this shift in Microsoft to have this growth the growth mindset, this learn it all culture. Yeah, that was fantastic. I love that piece of work.
That's amazing. Yeah, yeah, you're right. It's a lot of vulnerability, and we're seeing that now, aren't we, as well, play out during lockdown with a lot of the having to be vulnerable, being at home with their kids running around while they're on a call. You don't really get to see your leaders in that light.
Exactly.
Your perspective on the outside looking in, I'm sure you've been sort of monitoring what's going on. What's your thoughts around how leaders have responded to this new global?
Honestly, I think predictably enough, there's a bell curve. You hear some stories of people where you go, oh, well done. I love what you're doing to help people stay connected, to help them stay focused, to help them feel safe and celebratory. So, there's some people who are doing a great job, and then there's other organizations where you're like, boy, you just, that's ugly. What were you thinking? And then there's a lot of people that are right in the middle, that they're doing the best they can, and some bits are a bit ugly and some bits aren't. When I'm asked about this, because it's impossible to give advice, A, because I'm kind of anti just launching into random advice, but B, it's so different for different people. I would say to leaders, the first question I'd be saying to yourself is, how do I be a symbol and a beacon of the energy that I want to be in this world? So if you're the leader, people respond to the strongest signal in the room. That's kind of a facilitation or a keynote speaker maxim that I go by, which is like, my job is to actually set the energy in the room, because people respond to that energy. So part of what you need to be asking yourself as a leader is like, so what is that energy? And when I'm answering that question for myself, part of what I say to myself is, Michael, how do I find the path between the light and the dark? Because if you're too negative, if it's too doom laden, actually you drag yourself down and you drag other people down around you. So that's kind of a bit miserable. If you're too shiny, happy, unrealistic about just how hard things is, then the Stockdale Paradox is, to put it bluntly, Stockdale being a Vietnamese war prisoner of war. Stockdale would say, it's the optimists who die first. So if you're too shiny, happy, you're disconnected, you're a bit tone deaf, and you will likely plunge from overly optimistic to despairing. So it's like finding that place of grounded realism, where you're like, this is the situation now. I see it for what it is, and this too will pass, and we'll be out of the valley, and we'll find a way to the light. So it's around trying to find that path as best you can in the way that it makes sense to you, around what's the path between the light and the dark.
Love it. It's a great way of looking at it. I know you don't like giving advice. However,
I don't mind giving advice.
I was joking. Any advice in terms of, a lot of leaders, managers, including myself, are having now to have one-to-ones on Zoom, on video calls, coach virtually. It's a bit more difficult to read the room.
Yeah.
Any advice you give there to leaders about maybe tips or tricks of how to coach in this new digital world we're working in?
So I'll tell you about a structure that I've set up, and people may be able to steal or borrow or adapt stuff from this as suits them. I run a thing for my network called Cocktails and Questions, and 3 times a week at about 5 o'clock my time, 6 people, me plus 5 people, gather in a Zoom room. I've deliberately chosen that number of people. these are what some people call it weak connections. They're people I know a little bit. I've worked with them. I like them. They're not my best buds. I don't go out drinking with them on a regular basis, but I'm connected with them in some way. And having been running this for 2 or 3 months now, I found a rhythm that seems to work. The first is a check-in. So you've got to give people a chance to arrive and be human and connect on a human level with other people before you get going with stuff. So our check-in is that, it's a GPS check-in, as we call it. It's like, who are you? Where are you based? What are you up to in this world? What are you drinking? Because it's a cocktail thing. Sometimes people are drinking tea. Sometimes it's a old-fashioned. And then one thing that you're grateful for. And they don't have to explain it. They don't have to tell the story. They're like, in a sentence or two, one thing that they're grateful for. And what that does is it kind of welcomes people into the room. And we're there and we're connected and we've got a sense of the other human beings who are there. The next round is I provide a question. And everybody has 5 minutes to reflect on the question. There's no interruption from the audience. If you're interrupting, you just put conversations in the chat box. So questions or comments or resources or whatever. The question that we're working on this month is, what are you learning that you're attached to? What are you learning that you can let go of? And people have 5 minutes reflecting. And the non-interruption is that creation of a safe space where they can reflect on a question that's designed to push them a little bit into a place of vulnerability and being personal. Some people choose to be very vulnerable. Some people choose to be less. That's their choice. The month before that was, what are you learning? What's your learning edge about yourself, about your life, about your business? The month before that was, what crossroad are you at? And then after we've done the 5 minutes and we've had that interaction, there's a check out. And this is one of the questions from the Coaching Habit book, which is, so what struck a chord? What was most useful or valuable for you from that session? And people just have a sentence or two. But what that does is it structures a closing. So people know that we're done. So allow people to come in, be human and connect, create the right amount of space for what's in the middle. Don't overfill it, because that's what everybody wants to do. And then find a way to kind of make sure that the end is clear and that there's been a chance to be complete.
Love that. I love the space part, because I feel that's the part that I'm struggling with sometimes on a course with my team. Is because we're all there isn't time to just take a minute to think and reflect. And I just love that part. I know I've not heard anyone say that before.
There is if you ask people to check in on chat. Like, I run webinars with hundreds of people, thousands of people sometimes, and I'm getting them to interact on chat, because in part you can see how people are doing by what flows through the chat, and in a way that makes it synchronous. Whereas you can't go around a team of 30 and check in, because then your 1 hour meeting is done before you even started it.
Yeah. Very interesting. What else is top of mind? What else is given current events, what's happening, or the book? What else do you think that would be valuable to our listeners?
Well, we were talking about this before we hit the record button here, which is like, in part, it's understanding what the essential few is. What's absolutely critical in your life and in your work to get sorted, and to lower your standards ruthlessly on as many other things as possible. Because really, I think pretty much everybody is suboptimal right now. There's very few people that are operating at peak performance, because there's just a undercurrent of anxiety. What's happening with the economy? What's happening with my job? What's happening with my family? What's happening with my health? What's happening with my community's health? When do we restart? What's happening with our political leaders? I mean, they range from nuts to not nuts. I mean, there's just this underlying anxiety. And so your amygdala, your little lizard brain there, is just spending a whole lot of time freaking out. And when your amygdala is freaking out, it drains you. So I think you've just got to be ruthless about what fires you let burn, what plates you allow to break. Because so many people have those high standards where they're like, I am feeling a bit off. It is impossible. I am trying to do 3 full-time jobs now, be a parent, be a teacher, be a employee. But you know what? I'll still try and get all my stuff done. I'm like, you can't.
Yeah.
And what that means is you've got to, let stuff burn. I stole this from hearing a different podcast, Reid Hoffman on Masters of Scale.
That's a good
and just talking about some startup. And he's like, the whole thing about startups is you're moving so fast. The art of leadership is just acknowledging that a whole bunch of stuff is going to are dumpster fires that you're doing nothing about. You're like, that's ugly, that sucks, that's broken, that person's annoyed. We've made that call and we've got the courage to back it up.
Yeah, that was the start realization for my wife and I in the first few weeks, because I was trying to stay at peak performance while struggling everything, and it didn't work. I literally had an anxiety attack, and I suffer from anxiety, but it kind of flared up, and I was like trying to do a million things at once. And then my wife at work had a review. Actually, what a time to have a a review, and she was, literally just crying, beforehand, saying, "Oh my God, I fell behind," because she's obviously looking after her little one at the same time as well. So she fell behind on her work. She's like, "I can't believe I fell behind in the weeks before her review of all times." And before the call, she was so nervous, upset. And then her manager on the call was like, completely understand what's going on. We're still going to give you your bonus, even though you didn't hit the targets. And she just sort of burst into tears and started crying and was like, "Can't believe it." And I was like, well, that's the right thing to do. People understand that.
Well, there are acts you can make as an organization, as a leader, that will create stories that people will talk about for years to come.
Yeah.
That are actually stories are they're the circulating blood of your culture. So that decision, with your wife to go, you didn't hit your targets and you're doing great and we're going to give you the bonus. She will tell other people that story.
She has, and I've heard her.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that organization that she works for will be an organization other people will go, "I've heard good things about them."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, I think it's a good place to wrap it up. I'm so excited we finally made this happen, Michael. We're good.
Exactly.
Up in
it was
person.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Before we wrap up, if there's sort of one parting piece of, one takeaway, one parting piece of advice you want to leave everyone with, what would that be? And then where's the best place for everyone to connect with you, learn more about your work, get in touch?
Thank you. One piece of advice, this piece around, can you stay curious a little bit longer? To set this up, I'm like, can you stay curious for 2 minutes longer in a conversation? Not a day, not a week, not a month. I'm going for 2 minutes. So have a few good questions that maybe can get you just a little bit further down the path, and you'll actually find that those conversations and your leadership changes pretty radically. And for people who are interested in what I do, mbs.works is the name of the website that people can go to, and there's assorted resources there. We Will Get Through This is the name of a podcast that I host, where I'm interviewing people around resilience. And for some of the resources around taming your advice monster, theadvicetrap.com.
Amazing. And what about connecting with you personally? LinkedIn?
My LinkedIn connections are basically full because they cap out at about 30,000. But I've got hundreds of thousands of followers on LinkedIn, and I post there a lot. I post actually a video series called My Best Question, which is like a minute or two video 3 or 4 times a week there. So that might be another resource for people to check out on LinkedIn.
Yeah, was how I came across your work. And so I definitely highly recommend everyone following Michael on LinkedIn.
Thank you.
But apart from that, I'm really excited to have you here again. And for everyone obviously listening, make sure you go and check out the resources, grab the books as well. And thanks for everyone for tuning in on LinkedIn Live. It's always great to have you here with us daily now. So thank you for supporting the show. If you're new, please take a second to hit the share button, like, comment, share. We want to share Michael's incredible knowledge experience with as many people as possible to benefit everyone on this. So please take a second to do that. And also head over to hrdleaders.com/podcast, and you can subscribe to your favorite platform there as well. Apart from that, Michael, enjoy the rest of your day, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks to Ivan doing all the work behind the scenes as well. I appreciate that.
Don't steal him. See you later, Michael. Bye.
Bye-bye.